People who dated a prawn star. What was it like? Many years ago, I started dating a stripper in college. I learned that until very recently, she lived in California in a place she called Prawn Valley. If I'm remembering correctly, it was San Fernandino. She did prawn there for a while, right after high school, made a respectable amount of money, and moved to the East Coast to go to college. I constantly felt like I was on the verge of being replaced. She did whatever she wanted whenever the whim struck her, and I could tell she was always probing me for insecurity, which I simply didn't have. Despite all that, she wasn't demanding at all, and she paid for everything and would get mildly annoyed if I snuck a check or paid for something behind her back. The kex wasn't good. She had zero desire to please anyone but herself, but would get irritated if I finished and couldn't perform after, despite her never continuing after she got hers. She was incredibly conceited and would basically only talk about herself. One day, she didn't show up to the coffee shop we were supposed to meet at to study, and her phone was off. Cell phones were relatively new, and people treated them differently, so I wasn't worried. So I went to her apartment. When she answered the door, Em saw me, she just went, "Oh, sorry, I'm seeing someone else." When I asked for details, she just kind of shrugged her shoulders and said she needed to go. I later saw her walking with some Turbo Ultra Beefcake, and for the next year or so, would often see her upgrade to another dude. We had one class together a semester later, and she legitimately might have forgotten my name. Really glad I wasn't emotionally invested in that one. Edit. Hey guys, this is a lot of attention, so I'll just add that although it took a while, I'm happily married with children to someone I'm super emotionally invested in. Love you guys who had a similar experience. You're kings and queens in my eyes. Edit 2. Got it, San Fernando Valley, haha. Story 2. I worked in the prawn business in the 80s and 90s behind the camera. I dated several of the girls in the business at that time, though rarely anything seriously. Some of them were just really fun to hang out with. One day, I was on a shoot and was filming this incredibly good-looking woman having keeks. We wound up talking for like 2 hours while we were waiting around for another girl to show up. I asked if she wanted to get dinner. We did. Long story short, we're still married today. So yeah, I get to say the first time I ever met my wife was filming her having kex with another guy. Go figure. Story 3. Dated a girl when I was 19. She was wild, complete opposite of me, and taught me a lot about just not giving a duck. Poster child for social bravery. She always said I was the nicest person she'd ever been with, but she had a rough life. Her dad was a Scientologist, and she'd tell me about the men in the church who would pass her around as a kid. The reason I get hostile when Scientologists try to talk to me on the street. In terms of the kex, one night she was on top of me. The room was dark. My hands on her hips when I felt this sudden hot stinging feeling on my chest. The light switch was right above me, so I turned it on. This insane woman pulled out a razor blade and cut me while riding me. I told her to stop and kept going because duh. And she did it again. Her taste for extremes was her downfall. She left me for her abusive ex. He put her in the hospital soon, and she had a career for a few years where she was one of the up-and-comers to watch or whatever. We kept in contact, but it was mostly whenever she was down on her luck and needed to talk. She got out of the industry, got clean, had a kid, and a year later relapsed and died. We only dated for a summer, but the impact she had on me, a socially awkward, anxiety-filled kid, is something I think about almost every day. I always think about her kid and hope she only got the best of her mom. Edit. This got a lot of attention, and some people were able to point out who she was. I'd prefer people remember her at her best as a clean mother who loved her kid. Here's a little video of her I found after her passing. Story 4. I dated a guy in 2001 who went on to do prawn. He's a little skinny guy with a huge banana. Nice guy, good in bed, super smart. Way too much of a pothead and too personally irresponsible with things like money and cleaning up after himself for me to settle down with. Story 5. Dated an of girl. Truly is what they say. Narcissism to the extreme. If I wasn't okay, stressed, or unhappy, she gave absolute zero schmitz and was more concerned about how she felt. Don't do it except for the fun of it. Story 6. Back between 2021 to 2022, I dated a 52-year-old half-Japanese, half-Hispanic former bikini model raver. No, seriously, she's an EDM addict to this day, who worked in the industry for about a year back in the 90s. She was as physically vain and physically spectacular as you'd guess, but damn if she wasn't one of the most fun, energetic, nicest people I've ever been with. She had a few unfortunate missteps in life, but was always motivated to be better, especially for her grandson. If you're ever in Vegas and see a short woman with DD breasts and hot pink hair and a ton of Hello Kitty apparel, well, that means you're in Vegas, but it also means you've seen who I'm referring to. Story 7. Went on a few dates with one. First time we met, she wanted to meet at her place. She asked me to bring some shawarma, so I did. She has zero makeup on, not dressed up at all, and kept things non-sexual. The second time I picked her up and we went out clubbing in West Hollywood. This time she was well dressed up, makeup done, looked stunning. We had a great time and went back to her place. We had amazing keeks, if that makes sense. The next day, she did an in-tour for, I think, Playbee. They asked her about dating, and she mentioned our date last night. I got a shout-out, not by name, Bye-bye what we did, and she noted she had a great time and was taking it slow. The hosts were all like, oh. We went one more time after that for dinner and drinks. But then, I don't recall exactly what happened, but she just got more busy. Suddenly, I was ghosted. It turns out that she moved to Vegas on a whim. She told me she needed a break and cut all her social. Years later, it seems she reactivated her social. She told me AHE left the industry and was trying to be legit and love a quiet life. She did a bit of work after, I guess for extra money, but mostly she seemed to be wanting a regular life. All her Kexy social content was gone, and even images of herself were reduced. That last time was several years ago. She was always sweet and nice to me, but sadly, there was something broken off deep down inside. I could sense it. But I could also tell she really wanted to move past that, and I think her dating regular people and leaving the industry was a part of that process. I sincerely hope she found true happiness and peace. Story 8. I've dated 2 dominatrixes over the years. I'm not even into that, but it turned out they did that either as a job or a side hustle. Sometimes it was fine, sometimes it was weird, because it's simultaneously just a job and an incredibly intimate activity. And every day where it was for them and where it is for you can be different, depending on how the relationship is going. Unfortunately, the first one had a bunch of other stuff going on and would forget I exist if not in the same room. The other one was, in hindsight, using me to get back at her ex. Fun with both, until it wasn't. Story 9. Interestingly enough, I dated a girl who became a prawn star. She became a mainstreamer for a few years and now is a horse doctor. She was very cool back then and is still very cool today. She was just like any other woman, very open and outspoken. I moved out of town for work, and she and I lost touch until a few years ago. Story 10. I met and casually dated a rather successful girl for a while after meeting on a dating app. I found out a couple months in that she did and made a terrifying amount of money on it. I was suspicious when she bought 2 PS5s in one day for each household, like no big deal. We had a ton of fun together. She was very down to earth, recently divorced, and the kex was great. I only probed a little about her and she showed me a little of it. Mostly nudes and solo stuff. Some stuff with her ex-husband, nothing crazy. She showed me the thousands of dimes she was getting, and I believed her when she said she never moved any of it past DMs. It became a little thing for us that all these guys were dying for her attention, yet here I was getting to sleep with her. We talked a tiny bit about making content together, and I never felt fully comfortable doing it. I have a lot of identifying tattoos, and I didn't want our time together to become like work or money to exchange hands. Life got a little busy for both of us, and we eventually stopped seeing each other. Story 11. A good friend of mine married a very small-time prawn star. She was mostly a strip club headliner type, but she did some solo movies. She's awesome. Basically, they had an outstanding relationship and happy kids, and everything was really good. He died young, unfortunately, and now she is doing the widow thing, which is hard. But it's exactly like it would be with anyone else, save that. She has a pretty good number of people from the industry as a support structure. Story 12. There were days and sometimes weeks where she wouldn't have any work, and those times were pure fun. And then days where she would be on a project and I'd be alone. It works if you have an open mind, otherwise it's a disaster. I got jealous after a few months into it and saw that I can't make it work. Story 13. I dated a girl in high school who became a prawn star later on in life. She was beautiful but broken. Our relationship lasted for several years, and we were engaged to be engaged. I loved her a lot, but in my youth foolishly thought I could fix her. She cheated on me several times. Eventually it became too much, and I broke it off for good. I still carry a scar for her, and when I saw her doing prawn years later, it was about 5% disgust, 95% sadness. Oddly, I still wish I could help her, but we haven't spoken in decades, and I know better now. I'm married with kids and have never been happier. I do wish her well, though. She was my first true love, and I hope she finds what she's looking for, even though I know she probably won't. Story 14. I dated 2 girls, several girlfriends apart, who became strippers while we were together. The first one was my HS sweetheart, and when she decided to strip it, ducked with my head and we broke up. Fast forward 10 or so years later, and this other girl got talked into stripping by one of her friends. She used to lie to her parents and tell them she was staying over at Susie's, but would be in the city shaking it. She would show up at my place at 3 in the morning and dump her bag out on my bed. It had a lot of cash and usually some Sosane. We would count the money, do lines. It was really great. She haunts my dreams. Story 15. My first boyfriend in high school became a prawn star much later. To be honest, seeing him like that broke my heart all over again. I deeply loved him. Would have spent the rest of my life with him. I didn't want us to end, but let him go anyway. Spent 20 years waiting to fall out of love with him, but never did. I did love someone else, but he died suddenly when we were young. I couldn't even date after all that. I always felt like I was being unfaithful to my late fiancé. After all that, seeing the first love in that video, it just tore everything open like it all just happened. Love is cruel to some. Edit. This got more attention than I thought. Thank you for reading, and to those of you that reached out with sympathies and condolences, thank you very much. To those that reached out from a same place of love and loss, I'm so sorry. I'm not much, but I'm here if you want to talk. PM me. To clarify, I'm not pining over him and I don't want him back. I don't demonize him or judge him in any way. I love him, I always will. But he's on his own journey, and so am I. I went to therapy, I beat the drink, 2 years off the sauce, and I'm living a full and happy life with my dog and my telescope. I have peace, a scarred heart, and a story to tell, but really, I'm good. Story 16. This is 17 years ago. It wasn't the fun you thought it would be, and I got a hand on my own drug addictions by seeing how darker it got. Oddly enough, I found dating a retired escort to be way more rewarding and less like I was about to watch someone unravel. The keks sucked, but the glow jobs were everything you imagined the keks would have been. Story 17. Never dated one, but was friends with one. Dang if she wasn't one of the nicest and caring people. Would sometimes online chat with her between sessions. Wrote some books and went on a book tour for one of them. My buddy dated a stripper and she was the total opposite, a real mess. Was as crazy as you'd expect and neglected her daughter. I felt bad for the kid and would play a bit with her when they would come over to where we were hanging. You could tell she was starving for attention, as father figure type attention. I felt bad when the stripper and my buddy broke up. The kid cried the most. Story 18. I dated a guy whose last LTR was a prawn star, and the industry left its impression on him. Their story was that his family owned a video rental store in the 80s and 90s when it was really big business. They got in on the ground floor of VAS and regularly were invited to parties at the Playbee Mansion. He met a prawn star at one of the parties. They started dating. He owned a contracting business, and she did prawn part-time. He wanted to get married and settle down, but she liked the independence and the money. They went around and around, but she wouldn't quit prawn, so they broke up after 4 or 5 years. He was devastated. After that, he couldn't settle down, compared all women to pornographers, and women were somewhat disposable to him. He pursued me hard, but our relationship never took off. In my mind, I still cannot separate him from the damages of the prawn 10 years later. Story 19. I was in the industry for a while and dated a beautiful woman who won an AVN award and was quite well known. She was delightful, but our relationship ended because she died. Tragic, but at the time it seemed an occupational hazard in the industry. Not sure how it is these days. I changed fields after that. I'm not going to name her. I feel like it would be disrespectful to do so. Story 20. Meet a woman online years ago. At the time, I was extremely depressed and lonely. We would hang out as friends, eat pizza, and watch movies a few times a week. Found out she was an independent Keeks worker. She would ask to hang out whenever she didn't have clients, and we were both free. After a few weeks, she wanted to date, which surprised me. Then in the same conversation, she asked me to be her chaperone. The most illegal thing I've ever done was get traffic tickets. So this felt like a Walter White moment for me. She was a cool person, but I had to go my separate way after that conversation. To this day, I'm not sure why she asked me to work with her, but wherever she is today, I hope she's doing well. Story 21. I was really young and from a small town. She had already gotten a world of experience in getting picked by Penthouse and done a few years of the strip club scene. Our experience levels and lives were significantly different. Was for sure still finding myself. I was talking to a different girl in our astronomy class all semester. She didn't come one day and my ex swooped in, exchanged numbers. She invited me to the club to watch her work, and I thought I was getting used for money by some stripper, but she actually likes me. Or just wanted to hook up, really. I went to the club and was just super impressed with her spinning on the pole. We took a bunch of drugs for a few days and ended up saying, we're official. I think she regretted it like a few days later, but really tried to make it work because I was so into it. No matter what I did, I couldn't impress her. I wanted to be a perfect boyfriend. She made a note at the start of the relationship that we would only be cool if I let her do drugs, just weed, and she was high all the time, and hook up with this girl she was into, and I obliged. I had a lot of fun and really liked her, but I was way too into it. I moved in like almost immediately. In a few months, she realized it wasn't for her and started behaving way off. She broke it off and then realized she was pregnant a couple days later. She didn't want it, so I took care of her. She tried one more time to make it work after that, and it got messy with games back and forth to the point where we both got frustrated and said, damn it. Every few years, we'll interact on social media. I think she's out of the industry, and she had a kid a few years later. She's a cool chick. I kind of wish we'd catch up just so I can show her I'm not actually a dweeb. I was just super young. My behavior during that relationship still really bothers and embarrasses me. Story 22. Dated a cam girl. I knew I was being used for my money, but I was having keeks, so I was cool with it. She broke up with me because she found someone richer. Story 23. Freshman year of college. I dated a dude who I knew previously before he got into the prawn scene because we went to the same high school. We started talking and he was honest with me about him doing prawn, so we established boundaries and continued dating. The first red flags were that he was constantly asking me if he could record me and so forth. I repeatedly told him no, because that's just not my thing, and I have no desire to be on the internet in that capacity. I forget how many weeks into our relationship, but I get a message from a friend wanting to catch up and I tell him about my relationship. I guess word has gotten around that he was doing prawn, because he then asks if that was me in his recent video then. I told him no, because he's never recorded me. I go onto his profile, and there I was in backshots, with the most disturbing and derogatory title. I was completely mortified and heartbroken. I had no idea he recorded me, let alone posted it. My friend tried to calm me down by saying there was little traction to the video and nobody could tell it was me since there's no face. I was still just in shock. I confronted him and asked why he would do such an evil thing, and his exact response was, "I'm just hard-headed, I guess." I told him to remove the video and he did, but he just didn't seem to care that he completely violated me in every which way. I broke it off with him and blocked him on everything. I haven't spoken to him since. Story 24. X did of seriously. She was baller. It was great. 11/10 Kex. She paid for Schmidt because she liked to show off her limitless cash. But holy Schmidt, her phone went off minutely, at best. Sometimes multiple message notifications went off every minute. She straight refused to put her phone on DN or something when we were together. I got sick of listening to it and stopped bothering talking to her and moved on to see someone else. Was a bit lame because we did vibe heaps well. She was hot AAF. I definitely didn't mind all the nudes and filthy videos she'd send me whenever we weren't together for the night. Didn't talk to anyone about it either. Friends would definitely be weird about that stuff. Story 25. I dated a prawn actress. She was too extrovert for me. Zero shame. Great mouth skills, though. She told me they paid $1,000 a shoot. Eventually, she started mentioning having a kid, and I was like, nah. Story 26. I moved to Stalking in 2005, and for the first several years was really into partying and the LA scene. I made friends with a few guys who worked in the industry, but in DVD distribution and similar tangential industry stuff. Through then, I went to a lot of parties where there were a lot of prawn stars. I met a ton of prawn stars you may remember from mainstream prawn in the 2000s. I never really dated any, but I hooked up with 4. 3 were one-weekend stands, at the party, in a back room or bathroom. And one was a few times, including a few casual dates. They were very fun, very good in bed, not always in bed, and it was exciting to see people notice them when you were out with them. D-list celebrities for most, but a few fans would do anything to meet them, guys and girls. What I also noticed was when they were around prawn stars, other girls, non-industry, would be much easier to meet and hook up with. In general, the ones I met, including those I hooked up with, fell into a pretty similar category. But let me caveat it that this was while partying, weekends, and to be fair, I didn't know their real day-to-day life. A lot of the parties were very wild. Lots of droogs, drinking, which led to a lot of kex and similar. Some get-togethers were more normal, like pool BBQs or NFL watch parties. But nudity, topless anyway, was very, very common. Droog use rampant. Most people were very nice, but very insecure. Lots of baggage, and not to be a bad, but most seemed very dumb. They were personable and talkative, but complete unaware of anything going on in the world. Their life revolved around partying, would only travel to party places like Miami/Vegas/Ibiza, and of course, kex was not nearly as a big deal to them. What I also noticed was they were either on or off, meaning 11 p.m. on a Friday night, everyone was looking great, talkative, dancing, etc., but midday, midweek, they were a completely different person. To an extreme bit like normal people when they are socializing versus grocery shopping, I mean like 10/10 energy and personality versus 0/10, if that makes sense. I'm sure droogs had something to do with it, but not everything. I see some responders said they were vain. I saw that to a degree, but it seemed to be a front to me. In reality, I thought most were very insecure, eager to please, not just sexually, and looking for a group, security, normalcy to a degree. Many of the ladies looked much younger in person. I was in mid-20s and thought they were around my age or older till I met them, and many, not all, were or appeared way younger, like 19, 22. There was a lot of intra-industry dating, so you'd see catfights amongst the girls, hear or see real fights amongst the guys, but much less frequent, and hear of tons of cheating and scandal. Through friends, I still know what several are doing now, most retired a while back, but some are still into a version of prawn on of. A few have regularish jobs, tried to get into movies or music or jing, etc., and have had mild success. Some vanished from the friends of friends' lives. I hope in a good way, but who knows. Story 27. Dated a girl in the industry for a few months. She was really short, 5 at most. About 2 months into our relationship, she got a tattoo of my initials on her arm. I was a bit weirded out by that. A few weeks later, she ghosted me. A month after that, she asked if I wanted to come over to her place. And after that, we didn't talk again. It was a roller coaster ride of a relationship. The kex wasn't bad, but it wasn't good either. Story 28. Dated a dancer escort for a couple years, then kept in very, very close touch after. She wasn't the entire time, mostly after we split. Through her, I also met a number of other dancers, escorts, over the course of approximately 4 years. She'd had a very troubled childhood without much love from her mother. Didn't have a dad. And honestly, all of the women she introduced me to had some sort of real dysfunction in their childhood as well. Honestly, it was so sad seeing how they would lie to themselves about what they were doing and do copious amounts of droogs and alcohol before going to work for the night. I'd sit there in the bathroom with them while they got ready, and while from the outside you could say, wow, surrounded by a bunch of hot girls getting dressed, that must have been something. It was truly one of the most depressing moments of my life, watching it all go down. Probably even more so because I loved her. I never have, and after that certainly never will engage with strip clubs or Keeks workers of any kind ever again. Truth is, they all need help, and if not help, then just love honestly. And with that, I don't think any of them would do what they do. I just hope at some point they all find the love they deserve, in this life or the next. Story 29. I gave a Lyft ride to a retired 70s prawn star and her husband a few years ago. They were an adorable couple, and when she talked about her old job, her man wore the biggest Schmidt-eating grin on his face. Couple goals. Seriously. Story 30. I was in an on-again, off-again relationship with a cam girl who also worked regularly as an escort and had a stint in amateur prawn. We had a chance meeting in college. She didn't think much of me at first, but over time, she began to notice me in a different light. We went out a few times until eventually we started officially dating. That's when she started telling me about her side gigs. Now, at first, I was kind of accepting of it. I rationalized it as, finally someone cute is paying attention to me and she's cool, etc., so I can deal with it. Well, then she started telling me that she was doing scenes and random guys and girls that'd pay, and boy did they pay. I continued to keep rationalizing it. It was admittedly very hard to keep those feelings of discomfort down while I realized that I wasn't exclusive to her, that I was just a placeholder. Come to find out, she had another boyfriend in another state that she'd go out and see every so often. So I was done. It was a rough breakup on both sides. Mostly me, though. I was in a deep malaise for about a month or two when she finally messaged me and wanted to talk. Her and I began to be pretty good for a while, and that's when I noticed that she wasn't taking good care of herself. Her apartment was a wreck, and that was a trend that continued almost everywhere she went. She was in multiple accidents, regularly drank and took drugs, and just ducked herself up whenever she got the chance. She distanced herself from me unless we were going to a theme park or dinner or whatever spontaneous thing she would rope me into. Yes, I know I was being used in a lot of those situations. At the time, I didn't care. I was getting attention, and it felt good. The contact was sparse between us. I wouldn't hear from her for months at a time most times. Then one night I got a phone call from her. She sounded all right, but fairly down in tone. She asked how I was and what I was up to. She told me that her fiancé had just broken up with her and that she could use a distraction. At the time, I had moved and was now almost 4 hours away, and it was almost 11 p.m. I had told her that that wasn't possible, and she understood, although she sounded disappointed, and I told her to keep in touch still. And I reached out to her the next day. Nothing. And I tried several times over the course of a year. Still nothing. Still, until one day I checked her Facebook. It was converted to a memorial. She died that night. Tragically, the timing of it might mean that I could have been the last person that she spoke to. Now you might be wondering why I didn't think to check beforehand. I don't use social media often. And again, I would often have long stretches between messages, so I thought nothing of it. Symbolically, of course, I sent her a FB message telling her I'm sorry that I couldn't save her. I'm all right now, although it still hurts a little bit. Story 31. I've dated 3. Nothing particularly serious, but it was interesting. All 3 had similar issues that were very obviously on the surface. They were all really slow to open up and get vulnerable at all. They all had pretty and clearly were dealing with some kind of trauma in their background. Their love language was keks, not surprisingly. That's how they said thank you for even the smallest favor. And that kind of transactional keks was a lot more over the top and flamboyant, for lack of a better word, than when we were just having normal keks, which was more focused on taking care of the urge. There was a lot of keks. It was just how they showed affection. Lots of droogs, too. They always had droogs and could get anything they wanted. I'm not a psychiatrist, but it certainly seemed like they were dealing with a lot of stuff. Shocking. I went into all of them just assuming they would be casual, and they were. There aren't any real horror stories. I never expected anything serious, and it was mostly about what I expected. No big breakup stories or acrimony. We were never exclusive, and eventually we just kind of drifted out of touch. No hard feelings for any of them. One of them is still on the business as an actress. One got behind the camera, and one left entirely and married a millionaire and lives in LV. The latter two seem to have gotten better, hopefully. The one still in the business doesn't seem to have changed, but I haven't talked to her in a while, so I hope she has gotten some help as well. On the whole, it was interesting, and they were all really sweet people at heart who were dealing with a lot of schmeat. I sincerely wish them all well. Story 32. I've dated 2. One was the typical dancer turned model turned exotic dancer turned prone star. The other was your average OnlyFans content creators. The 2, and their social circles, couldn't be any more different. The first was an awesome human, and while we didn't work out, I still hold a lot of respect for her. She's a realtor now and doing well. Everything about her career is pretty generic, except she got out before it consumed her. She started exotic dancing and modeling to pay for college. Took a few solo and FF movie roles to get more money. That led to a few MF and then one Kex. I met her right as she was getting out. Our first date was 2 nights after her GB. Kex was amazing. And she craved more intimate Kex most of the time, but she was a performer. And if I wanted to role play something, she'd nail the part. She also had zero jealousy and was strongly bi. I think she was more Kexually into women and being hot AF with a great personality. There were a lot of MFFs with her. The second was someone I dated for a short time, but she really made an impact. It's really my fault that I ignored all the warning flags. Basically, in the pandemic, she lost her job and she, like everyone else it seems, started an OnlyFans. At first it was her doing solo stuff, then she added me without my face and things were going good. She was making decent money, learning all about film and editing, and it wasn't bad. But as soon as she started losing subscribers, all those ignored warning signs came out in force. Every minute of her life was about how she needed more subscribers, why no one thought that she was pretty anymore. And it wasn't about the money at that point, it was all about feeding her ego. She started talking with people online about doing collabs, then about surgeries, and it just spiraled into chaos. She started hanging out with Botox queens with collective IQS that couldn't break triple digits. I was planning to break it off, but ended up doing so on the day she came over with the most ridiculous-looking duck lips. I couldn't look at her talk without wanting to bust up laughing and cry for her. She came over hoping to do a MFF with her friend, and I just couldn't. During this time, I probably met around 20 successful and hot content creators. They were all trash. At this point, I can't even look at Prawn on Reddit because they're all content creators, and it reminds me too much of all of them. Story 33. I was with a stripper for a while who ended up doing prone eventually down in Miami. Also ended up overdosing in Miami and dying too. I'm still not over that crap. She was the best person I knew. Super fun to be around. Very unselfish, friendly, kind to people. Like, if she saw them getting picked on, she would defend them. She was also really crazy and tough. Actually, I saw her get in multiple fights before and even kick a dude's ass once. But she wasn't butch. She was very feminine. She was obviously very promiscuous in life. I mean, like, before she even started stripping and all that, but that never bothered me. I kind of figured there were some underlying issues, so I didn't hold all that against her. I just got used to it. She wasn't, like, flagrant about it in front of me. I just knew it went on when I wasn't around, and it didn't really even bother me that much at all. I genuinely loved her, though. It really messed me up when she died. I was in rehab when it happened, and I left the program and got high when I got the news and overdosed myself twice in 2 days. But I eventually got clean, sober 4 years now. Story 34. It's my time to shine. I live in the aforementioned Prawn Valley, aka the San Fernando Valley north of LA, which is known historically as the prawn capital of the world. In the 1990s and 2000s, there were plenty of prawn actresses around if you were in the right age bracket and sort of aware of the scene. I met many girls in the business back then and frequented certain bars and events where industry girls like that would hang out because they understandably felt more comfortable being around their peers. I hooked up with a couple different actresses like that on occasion. But my best story would be about 3 girls who were living in a house together. The thing to remember is that if these ladies were mildly successful in the business, that is busy, shooting scenes every day or other day, they made a really nice income. Not a fortune, but they were balling for their age and it was all fast cash. So they were independent women, feeling empowered by their success. And of course, young and wanting to have fun. It was an exciting time for them. And I got to go along for the ride for a while. I would definitely echo what someone else said here. The girls had their own money and loved to treat us to drinks and dinners, and of course always bought all the fancy purses and shoes they wanted. They loved to go out and were a lot of fun in a bar, etc. These particular 3 girls were all mid-level stars. Not hugely famous, but if you gooned to prawn a lot in those days, you would recognize their names for sure. Anyway, they rented a huge, furnished, gorgeous house here in the valley, and I was sort of dating one girl. So my friends and I would party there every night. They had all the fun toys, Xbox, karaoke, whatever, a stocked bar and all the droogs, and they never had to be up early for work. It wasn't like we'd go there and kex every night. They were normal and sweet girls, even if a little misguided by their lifestyle and line of work. But there were definitely a lot of out all the time. Girls kissing each other and dancing together, dildos strewn about. And when my chick and I would hook up, it was definitely all the bells and whistles, performance-type kex, but believe it or not, that can get old pretty quickly, and she found it endearing that I just wanted to have normal, sincere type kex. Still freaky and fun, but without all the over-the-top embellishments. I think what surprised me and stands out the most from those 4 or 5 months was how sweet and normal these ladies were, despite the fact they were performing wild acts on camera every day. We're all humans, just trying to make our way through life, picking up some experiences along the way, trying to find happiness however we know how. I felt that. Story 35. Dated and of model, insanely good looking, both face and body. She could turn heads wearing sweats and those stupid Ugg boots. Personality was okay, I guess. She wasn't rude, but you could tell she didn't have to be astute to get what she wanted in life. Never really had a bad attitude, more or less just nonchalant. Kex was great. She was very adventurous and did almost anything we could think of. Had a few threesomes, private lavish parties, etc., etc. She'd actively try to pick up women while we were out. Didn't mind if I did the same. Bad part? The phone. She was constantly replying to messages and chats. Couldn't give it a break for even 15 minutes. Once, right after Kex, I could hear her already on her phone in the bathroom as she was cleaning herself up. I knew in my mind I'd never be permanently with her, so when I got annoyed enough, I told her it wasn't working and moved along. Story 36. I dated 2 cam girls over the years. Well, one dated and the other. One of them I met before she started camming. She was a 23-year-old art school student, and we met on Occupid. She was from an upper-middle-class family and never really had a job in her life. Her parents would just give her money all the time. She always had money and never expected me to pay for anything, so it was surprising when I learned she started camming. Very beautiful, light blue eyes and long curly black hair, never steps out the house without her hair did. Full makeup and a cute or Kexy outfit. She was also super nice and sweet when she was happy and feeling stable. Often she would fly off the handle for the smallest things, and was constantly insecure about her looks, our relationship, always thinking I was cheating. Later, after I ended it, I learned that, according to her sister, she had bipolar disorder. So that explained her behavior. Kex was very good. She always wanted it and was vocal and active. Glow jobs were some of the best I've had. The other cam girl I met while she was already camming. She had also been stripping for a couple of years prior, but at this point, she was mostly camming. We met because we knew a lot of the same people from the rave scene, so I added her on Facebook. Eventually, we made plans to hang out in Chinatown, and not long into our hangout, she invited me to her place. We got there, and even though I knew about this because I saw some of her video clips that she would post on Facebook, I was still a little surprised to see that she had a stripper pole permanently installed in her bedroom, not the weak spring-loaded one that you can take down at any time. So she put on music and started stripping. She went down on me for a bit, and then we vucked there in her bedroom. I think her dad might have been home upstairs. She was about 26, but still lived at home. She was very petite, blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl in perfect shape from all the pole dancing, and she had the most amazing ass of any girl I've ever been with. She told me that she is schizophrenic. Unfortunately, not long after I was with her that day, she seemed to be online less and less, and then she messaged me some wild messages about how I'm evil or something. Then she blocked me. A couple years later, she unblocked me and added me again. She goes live on Facebook with boring, pointless videos, just rambling about energy or sage, or sometimes just gibberish and dancing around to music in frumpy pajamas with wild-looking thinning hair. She also looks like she is either anorexic or a dope fiend now. Really sad and unfortunate. Story 37. Dated a very well-known escort/OnlyFans girl. We're talking 6-figure a month, cars received as gifts. Travel across the world for 2-week all-expense vacations with insane levels of wealth individuals. She was great 80% of the time. 20% of the time, you saw weird demons come out. Things like, do you know what men would do in hopes of spending a night with me just talking, and you were okay letting me pay for coffee when I offered? I'm a queen, you should learn to never ever let me pay. Even if I ask, that's the bare minimum I expect. Obsession with her worth as a woman, and connecting it to money was super annoying. For lack of better terms, she was just broken sometimes, and it would come out in the weirdest ways possible. A part of me stuck around just to watch the crazy crap happen sometimes and grab the popcorn and watch. Like another weird example is what it took for her to kiss me. She'd let me do anything Kexily I wanted to her, but the years of escorting and never kissing clients made her wires up there a little crossed when it came to normal relationships. Would I do it again? But I would not make her a GF dating partner this time around. Too much baggage to handle. Story 38. Not exactly a prawn star, but I dated a young woman who did a few XX scenes with known producers, and when we were dating, it was her career. She told me on the first date, and I was a little taken aback, but still game since she was so gorgeous and Kexy. It was perfect for me at the time, coming off a long-term relationship, and also feeling the last of my young man oats as I turned 40. We dated on and off for almost a year. She was beautiful and smart, and fun to hang around with, but she was a little broken inside with little self-esteem and a strong desire to please a father figure, I guess. And so young, though she had wisdom and intelligence beyond her years. In the end, the age and dynamic made it a little uncomfortable and we stopped seeing each other, though we hooked up a few times, subsequently. The Kex was amazing and no holds barred, with her constantly saying things like, I want to practice this thing I might have to do for a scene. "Are you game?" and telling me how she'd had a crush on me forever. She switched effortlessly between prawn star talk and real intimacy in bed, which was super hot and made both feel very genuine. She was like some magic phenomenon that made me feel better after a period of loss and mourning without asking barely anything but attention and affection in return. I think it filled both our needs at the time, but was never going to be a long-term, intimate relationship. Which is a shame because I thought very highly of her. We were just at wildly different places in our lives. I think that now, with maturity on both of our parts, we'd be more compatible. But that's life, right? Sometimes we meet the right person at the wrong time. Story 39. I went on a date with a prawn star who, at the time of the date, I didn't know they were a prawn star. We talked about a bunch of stuff, but when work came up, she was standoffish with talking about it. She said she wasn't sure if she was going to stay at her current job long. She said being there was eating her up, and it made her sad to talk about while she was trying to decide if she stays in her industry. And I just sort of left it at that. We had a good time, and I went back to her very pink apartment. We had keks, and I remember thinking, this is too good. This feels professional. But of course, it didn't register that she actually was a damn professional. The next morning, we grabbed breakfast, and I tried to ask if she was up for a second date. She said yes, but just told me to not ask about her job, and she would tell me about it when she was ready. A few days went by with us talking, and her being unsure about when she was available for our second date. The conversation was good. We replied to each other quickly, and she was just as excited to talk to me as I was to talk to her. But when the topic of the second date came up, she was just hesitant to pick a day. Eventually, she decided to tell me that she wasn't ready for a relationship, and it's because she decided to stay in her industry, to keep working the job she was working. I said I don't care what her job is, and she said she cared. It would make her feel insecure about my feelings toward her, and she didn't want to constantly have anxiety about that. She didn't go into specifics, but when she put the final nail in the coffin of our budding relationship, she said that if I wanted to know more, I could Google her stage name. Carmen Calloway. This wasn't her actual name. I knew her by Madison on our date. We stayed in touch for a bit through social media, and then eventually I moved to a new state across the country, met my current wife, and let Madison become a fond memory. But I did look her up recently, and she is now one of the most outspoken voices against the prawn industry. I'm glad she got out of it and started fighting back against the issues that industry inflicts on everyone, from performer to consumer. Story 40. When I lived in Leh 15 years ago, I was in love with someone who had moved out there. We were on and off during high school, which was difficult because she attended a different school and was an actress, so we didn't get to see each other often. Additionally, she was a bit flighty. When I moved to LA with a friend, she and I reconnected, though she was over our relationship, which I accepted. She suggested going out one night with a friend of hers and mentioned she would bring the guy she was seeing. I agreed, saying, "Yep, that sounds good." Her friend turned out to be a prawn star I had seen before. She was gorgeous, adorable, and very kind. I remember her being so happy to be there and possibly on E, however. I blew it because I was still into my ex and felt hurt watching her have a great time with this new guy gallivanting around the bar we were at. I drank too much, and my prawn star date ended up being my psychologist that evening. The next day, I received a text from my ex saying, "Well, you sort of blew it with Mel." I replied, "Probably." Sitting here and thinking in hindsight, it was probably a good thing nothing transpired with her, both of them. Story 41. Had a crush on a coworker back in 2001. She was cute AF, had a crazy good body. She was on-off with another coworker, so nothing happened between us. Fast forward 5 or so years. I'm back home from the military at the local strip joint, and she comes out dancing. We talked for a while that night and end up dating for a few months. She had a bad couple years before and ended up doing several movies. Oral was 10/10. Kex was great at first. She was like a human Kex doll. She would sell, she was loving everything. But no real intimacy, if that makes sense. No real breakup. She liked living the stripper/F&B lifestyle, which didn't fit my 8-5 work schedule. Story 42. Right after college, about 17 years ago, I briefly dated a girl who made softcore prone. I met her because her older sister was in a sorority at my school. She had an amazing body, but not much of a personality. She wasn't a huge partier and was really introverted. I was going out to bars 3-4 nights a week, and I'm pretty outgoing. I ended things with her after about 3 weeks for 2 reasons. First, I've always been more attracted to girls with ambition, and she was just doing it for the easy money. And I could tell she really didn't have the drive to pursue a real career. I would have at least been impressed if she was ambitious about the prawn, but she wasn't. But the big reason was I really couldn't handle the attention from my friends. It was all they talked about. It was how they would introduce me to new people. I got a million questions about the keeks with her every day. It was pretty good, but not the best. I just wanted to be me and not just the person dating the prawn star in other people's eyes. Story 43. Hello, I'm a lesbian who dated a retired award-winning prawn star who had a lot of men and women before we dated. I met her through a dating app during pandemic, and she was separated from her ex-husband at the time. I didn't really care about the prawn stuff, but I did care a little about what my parents thought of it. She had some interesting, crazy stories about her prawn days, and I didn't really mind hearing about most of it. However, what I did kind of mind hearing about was her escort days. While we were together, she was still doing some solo OnlyFans stuff, and she had a couple clients who paid her to write hot stories about them and send them specific kinds of pictures. Personally, I did not really care because she spent a lot of the money on taking me out on fancy dates. I did set a boundary once because she was considering doing some in-person dominatrix stuff, and I was uncomfortable with her doing in-person work while we were dating. As far as the kex went, it was good when we had it, which actually was not often because she had kexual trauma, go figure, and I wanted her to know that she had more value to me than kex. She was crazy though. She would have done anything. I'm not going to go into specifics about our breakup, so I don't dox myself. But she was confused about her kexuality at the time. And there were a lot of red flags I just willingly chose to ignore at the beginning of the relationship, including some obvious narcissism issues which many people on this thread have already brought up. She is also severely bipolar. I also very briefly dated someone in college who has since transitioned to a man and is now very famous in the industry. This seems like an entirely different person now. Story 44. I dated a girl for a very short time that eventually became a model. She got really assertive and clingy in a very toxic way. After we had keeks for the first time, like she expected me to leave her. I stuck around despite the red flag, and things got worse and worse as time went on, to the point that I was really starting to worry about my physical well-being around her. I ended up dumping her after she confronted me for cheating with someone I was being paid to help move. She had followed me all the way to the move site where I was working with 2 other guys to get the move out in order. Once I realized it wasn't a coincidence and that she had been following me, I told her to never contact me again and to leave before I call the cops, which she did, but then was sitting at the entrance of my apartment building 6 hours later, acting like nothing had happened. Only had to deal with her following me around for a month before I moved to the opposite side of the world to teach English when my lease was up, so I decided to ignore her everywhere she followed me to. Was originally not going to go if things worked out with this girl, but then went all in. Once I realized how psycho she was. Luckily, she never found me or bothered me again after that. Story 45. Met a cam girl at a bar 8 years ago and hooked up that night. I thought that'd be the end of it until some months later she reaches out and wants me to come over to her place, which was a lot more luxurious than I had expected. Apparently she was making quite the income and also had fans bombarding her with expensive gifts. I'm guessing she was more popular than others, but I never bothered to actually look her up. I had visited her a few times and we would go out for dinner and drinks, then end up messing around back at her place. Sometimes she would show me some of her steaming sessions, which I wasn't all that interested in. I would spend the night there, but every time I fell asleep, she would stay up. And every time I woke up, she'd still be awake. She was very nice, and I could tell that she harbored at least some genuine affection towards me. I would wake up to lewd selfies from her and get messages like, "I miss your kisses," and such. I think I could have tried to pursue a serious relationship. She was very fun to be around, let me be myself, and she was extremely attractive. The kicker was that there was no way my folks could abide by her being in the prawn industry. And honestly, I wouldn't be able to handle it either. We eventually fell out of communication and stopped seeing each other, though that was likely caused by me distancing myself. Even though I'm in the best relationship of my life, I do think about her and hope that she's doing well. Story 46. I dated a girl who during pandemic turned into a OnlyFans model. You can't blame her. She lost her job, still had bills and kids, and needed a way to support them. Dating her was kind of like dating that friend that never understands why things happen to them. She got drunk one night and drunk drove fell asleep at the wheel, crashed her car pulling into her own driveway, then called me to talk about it at like 4 a.m. asking why this always happens to her. She'd tell me wild train wreck stories about how she and her sister married these 2 brothers. Then one night they were all curious, got drunk, swapped partners, and then the next day carried on like normal. She was fun, but she also broke up with me often. One every 3 months or so, she'd break up with me, and then a while later asked to get back together. Despite everything I typed, I really liked her, and it seemed like she was calming down, leaving that part of her life behind. Finally, she took it too far one of the times she broke up with me, and was downright shocked when I wouldn't take her back. I got calls from friends and family asking if I was okay since I wouldn't take her back, and how she had called them crying her eyes out because I wouldn't take her back. She's dating one of the other guys in that friends group now. I personally don't like hearing how she is. She came to my last birthday party, which no one else saw why I had a problem with that. Well, I've distanced myself from those friends lately. Life goes on. Story 47. And I dated one in the mid-2000s. She was transitioning into being more of a writer while we were going out. She did more niche prawn. She came and went depending on her schedule. We'd go for a while without much contact, and then she'd contact me when she was in town and we'd hang out. Was she a bit of an opportunist this way? Yeah, but that was just her. She was a blast and a really sweet person. she could also drink like a pro. She unfortunately passed away about 12 years ago. I think our relationship helped me to relax in relationships and not let everything bother me. I think this is what set me up for my current relationship with my now wife. Story 48. I dated an actress when I was in my 28 SS. I met her at a store that did outcall escort, legal in this country, and I met her fairly regularly through said store. My friend was a pretty established DJ, and I used to head to the club regularly with him. She had quit her previous escort gig, and she had just started DJing. This is pretty normal over here with girls trying different things to keep themselves relevant rather than just geeks work. Out of sheer coincidence, she ended up getting booked regularly at the same venues as my friend. I guess the fact that we were used to being sexual with each other, coupled with the alcohol and the regularity that we would meet, it was kind of inevitable. For those curious, we ended up hooking up in the garden during one of her gigs. A bit of alcohol in both of us, and we just started making out. She was honestly a fairly normal girl who just happened to be an AV actress and a DJ. The kex was fairly vanilla, and she never wanted to do anything she did in her videos because that was for work. Our schedules didn't often overlap, and we saw each other more at clubs and the pregame for the club than any time else. Our relationship was mostly just kex, clubs, and alcohol. We ended up breaking up over that, but we're still on good terms with each other. Last I chatted, she was dating a medical doctor. She's still doing adult work and jing, and I'll say she looks better now than when she started. Story 49. I dated a girl long who went on to do amateur prone. She was active on some subreddits here like 7 or 8 years ago, and had an OnlyFans under a different name at some point as well. I only found out a few months back when I stumbled across an album of her nudes and recognized her despite her face not being in them. I can't say I was surprised. I think going through what she went through messed with her sexual development, made her hypersexual. She'd cheat as well, just had no control over her sexual urges at all. She's now a he, and not the same thing, but my first girlfriend used to have a prawn Tumblr where she uploaded nudes. I've seen her pictures reposted literally everywhere. I report them whenever they pop up. But I'd say of those girls who have a lot of nudes out there, she's probably among the most famous ones. Story 50. Back in the late 90s, I was in the army and met a woman in the barracks. I was leaving the shower, walking back to my room wearing a towel. She was looking for somebody from Delta Company, but she was on the Charlie Company side of the barracks. I told her that I didn't know where they are, but she could wait in my room. I jokingly mentioned that there were no shirts allowed in my room after 16:30, and she did not hesitate. So here I am with a beautiful half-Korean lady, early 20s, and I'm on cloud 9. Cloud. She wasn't a prawn star, but she worked at a strip club. I got along with her so well that when I got off CQ duty, I would go to her apartment, get into her bed, and she would sleep with me. Just sleep. I didn't want her to think I was just after kex, and we took things really slow. Despite seeing each other in the nude, we didn't ever fool around. Eventually, I insulted her friend, and she got really offended. That was the last time I ever saw her. Sorry, my story probably wasn't a good answer to the question, but it brought back a memory. I felt like getting it off of my chest. Story 51. Dated a smoking hot dude with a huge banana who worked me over like a god like twice in 2007. 8. After we fell out of touch, I always thought he should have become a prawn star or kex worker. Well, we rekindled our relationship in 2017 and were together for a few years. That's when I learned he had been, you guessed it, an escort and a prawn star when we dated the first time around. Huge banana, ridiculous stamina, but interestingly enough, not kinky at all. His favorite thing in the world was to calm me missionary while making intense eye contact. I'm assuming because he never did that in his professional life, but he would get naked on a dime with no shame. I'm the same. So it would be go time anytime and place I felt like it. So yeah, those were the positives. The negatives were that it turned out my boss's boss's boss was a client of his. I also always worried who in my life might know about his past, and like many in his field. Story 52. I've dated 2 male prawn stars in the past. Not at the same time. Neither lasted very long, but it was all right while it lasted. Both guys used the money to fund their tech startups, with varying success, so I caught them on the tail end of their geeks work career. One guy is now very successful and has an app website that I see around pretty often. He was sweet, very romantic, but talked a lot and was incredibly impatient. And man, he had great taste in fancy restaurants. The other guy was getting kicked out of a bar for doing groogs in the bathroom last time I saw him. He had a pretty rough life, I think, and had some other issues going on. He also had a lot of beef with Owen Gray, that was weirdly a topic on a few of our dates. I also think this guy had ties with some organized crime. His apartment always had shipments of arms going in and out. Very strange. Both always paid for everything. Were strictly monogamous and pretty protective of me around other guys. They also had a fair amount of free time. Both relationships ended up ending not because of their job, but it just didn't click. Hope they're both doing well. Story 53. I had my first kex with a UK prawn star back in 1989. I had met her on a train coming back from London, and we both exited the train at the same place. We swapped numbers as I was a photographer and she was a model. I phoned her and we arranged to meet at my college where there was a studio. I was shaking like a leaf whilst photographing her. She just kept taking clothes off. We got on really well. Anyway, I ended up losing my verge in a film development room. If I said I lasted 5 months, I would be exaggerating. She was fire. We met a few more times and she started to tell me stories about her modeling, people she had met through it, that type of thing. I was the only person she met with alone, apparently. Normally, she would take someone as a chaperone. Eventually, she asked me to chaperone her, but I couldn't do it. I was attracted to her, but couldn't support her that much. I always wanted to get in touch with her and wondered if she ever thought of me. But who remembers Mr. 5 Mins? Story 54. Dated a girl for a few months in 2017 that tried to hide from me that she worked as a prawn star in the recent past. Less than 6 months before I met her. I'm not gonna lie, Kex was great, and she was open for anything in bed. A few months after our relationship started, she finally confessed that she worked in prawn for around 2.5 years, but she had quit the industry. I wasn't expecting this, but somehow I wasn't surprised, maybe due to her very open and kinky attitude towards Kex. Don't get me wrong, I loved Kex with her, and I don't have any problems with girls that are very open about Kex, but it's definitely something unusual. Coming back to her old profession, I was surprisingly okay with that, especially since she was a retired prawn star now, however. Around the same time that she confessed this, I also found out that she was drug user, and that was the deal breaker for me. Story 55. She wasn't a star but did prawn, had 1 DVD and a bunch of scenes on a now defunct site. It was not a good experience. She was selfish, self-absorbed, and pretty much just a gold digger. Ever have a cat that wants something then as soon as you give it to them, they couldn't be bothered with it? That's how trying to have a relationship with her was, and what loving her was like. Story 56. I dated an OnlyFans model/stripper before she did any of that back in high school. I have since dated other people in that field of work, but this one ducked me up the most. She was a really nice, quiet girl who was in my video production class, and I thought she was so cute. Got her Snapchat, and we talked all the time. She had a ducked-up family. No mom and her dad hated her. We didn't last very long because she flew off the handles and didn't want me around. We reconvened later on and hung out a bunch when she was making content and stripping, which I didn't mind. Unfortunately, she passed away about 2 years ago. I think it was on purpose because right before it happened, she exposed one of my former friends. She came with receipts. Very obviously not friends with him anymore, and I hadn't been for years. Sad, man. Story 57. I went on like 3 dates with a woman who did prawn, and I'm pretty sure she was an expensive escort as well, but we didn't talk in detail about that. Contrary to the experience of another commenter, she was pretty humble and great in bed. I'm very vanilla, but she said she didn't need to bring work home and was fine with that. We didn't date long term because she didn't want to date monogamously, not counting work. She wanted to be free to date multiple people if she wanted. And I didn't want a long-term non-monogamous relationship. We stayed friendly until we both left the city. She has since quit the industry and got a nose job, so I'm not sure she'd be recognizable to people who knew her from her videos. Story 58. I briefly dated a girl who did prawn and was an it girl for a while. She drove a BMW and owned a condo while in college. I asked if she had a rich family, and she said, just don't Google me, so of course I did. Eventually, she figured out I knew, but I said a friend told me. She was nice. Really emotionally damaged from the work, though. I never let it affect our relationship, and she never tried to act like we were in an XX video together. It was just a relationship. It fizzled out because we just were different people and wanted different things. I wanted to live on the West Coast for work, and she wanted to live in Tucson and start a family. Haven't talked to her in ages. I'm sure she's doing well. Story 59. I briefly dated someone who did of, and she was the messiest person I ever met. All the garbage and laundry was there in the room, just out of frame of the camera. Physically, she was flawless. But she didn't make me feel good about myself and kept saying how hot I would be if I started working out again, so I broke it off. Story 60. My husband's childhood friend was dating a pretty well-known prawn star, who now makes her own content, until earlier this year. His friend really fell for her, and they spent years together just having fun and enjoying life together. She, the prawn star, absolutely devastated him by blindsiding him and leaving him with seemingly no explanation except for maybe the fan base figured out their relationship. I'm still not really sure what happened. It was pretty hard to watch, but they seemed like they were really enjoying life together up until then. Take that how you will. Story 61. I went on 1 date with a girl in high school who is now a prawn star. I'm not surprised where she ended up. She was always into modeling and wanted to be in Playboy. She did end up on the Playboy website and now does scenes for Score under a stage name. I wonder how things could have been between us. But it's very clear, this is the life she wanted, and I really wanted the life I have now. Additionally, I think she's a terrible actress. Even in plays in high school, she just doesn't sound natural in any way. Story 62. Very non-sexual, but fun in so many ways. She never looked like she did on camera. Early 2K. She always downplayed her looks, wore conservative clothes. I will say, when we were intimate, it was not like a movie. It was very much like another guy, said candles, low lights, soft music. Anyway, she helped me out of a weird, dark place, but life required her to move, and my job didn't let me. Also remember when I found out how I was so judgmental and how cool she was took me to school with her logic. Men sell their backs to put up roofs. Wall Street men sell their charm and brains. DRs sell their hands and brain. I'm simply selling a different part of my body. Story 63. Currently in a relationship with one, nothing about her work life interferes with our personal life in ways that affect it negatively. She's honestly just a super supportive and all-round fantastic person that is lovely to be around. Story 64. So not me, but I have a crazy story here. My best friend in HS dated someone else there. He was obsessed with her. County called him BC. She had an STD and told him to get tested from a list she gave the county, and I drove him there anyways. A year later, he was scrolling yellow YouTube and came across her. I won't say her name, but statistically, she was like a top 10 prawn star of the 2010s and has over 1 million followers on Insta. Like usually it's not a set for life type industry, but she's probably up there. Story 65. Dated a girl that did mainstream prawn and of. She had to travel to Vegas once a month to shoot scenes and was getting tested once a month. It's roughly similar to a regular job because most of them view it as work, and then put on a specific personality for marketing purposes, interviews, etc. It's going to boil down to how you view prawn. If you think it's competition, then you will be miserable. If you view as just another job to pay the bills, then it's relatively normal. Story 66. I've dated two. One of them unfortunately died. The other gained weight consistently until she became unpopular. Drugs and alcohol were the reason, but you can really see where not making good life choices gets you. Story 67. Never dated her, but my best friend is a super well-known prawn star. It's pretty chill hanging out with her around town and doing things. I always assume people think we're dating, but never have cared. She and my wife get along great, and that's all I could ask for. Story 68. My friend is dating a former dominatrix dancer. She's been out of the business for a few years. They're both big Fish fans and like the rave scene, so I think their relationship only works for them. An odd but perfect match. She's very lovely. You wouldn't think she did prawn until out of nowhere she's going on a tangent about stepping on a man's junk in heels. They work really well together and are talking about starting a family. Story 69. Here is my humble experience. At first, it's cool and refreshing. Second, from the first moment, there is no depth or meaning in the whole relationship. Third, tons of mental issues and literally dating a roller coaster. Even the kex is horrible because of the mental crazy moods kicking in. Fourth, everything in the world is about her. Fifth, there will be no trust and will end up in cheating for better income person. Sixth, hell, they all smoke, drugs, and every bad habit consumption. So don't bother. Story 70. I dated one for a few years. She's a really sweet person, and we're still dear friends. There have been a couple of others, too. Didn't work out as well, but they're fine women. Not all prawn workers, kex workers, are the same. Like the rest of us, there is great variety out there. Story 71. I worked in a strip club in the 90 AS. A number of the girls there started in prawns. She was married, and my introduction to polyamory. Outside of the club, she was pretty normal. She wanted to keep the kex and such separate. Story 72. I've slept with a few, not dated. The kex was great. But as far as dating, I couldn't see myself with them at all. One was actively shooting, and we'd hook up when she would come back from Miami. The other was retired, shot a few scenes, and told me she kind of regretted it. Story 73. Very briefly dated a stripper who later became a prawn star when I lived in Hawaii, 1993, and they used her for every Asian-based prawn in the later 90s. Met her at her job and a very well-known name. She was a headache and glad she did well but wouldn't recommend.